I'm Sally Maitlis. I'm a professor here at the Saïd Business School at Oxford University, and I study people at work. And I'm particularly interested in people who encounter unexpected difficulties in their work and how they make sense of what's happened to them and how they feel about that emotionally. So in this study, which I'm doing with my co-author Kira Shabram, who's at the University of Washington, we're studying animal shelter employees, people who work in animal shelters, trying to make lives better for the animals in them. My great interest is the difficulties that people doing this kind of work, or doing any kind of work which they consider to be their calling, encounter as they're doing that work. And there are many definitions of a calling. We regard it as people who are fulfilling what they believe is their purpose in life. This is what they believe they are here to do. So this group had a lot of things in common. They were all passionate about animals. They all shared a common purpose, which was to make their lives better. And they all were convinced that this was their calling. But there were subtle differences that affected how they responded to the challenges they encountered, and that these differences accumulated over time to end up leading them onto quite different paths. The first path we call the identity-oriented path, and that's because these people understood their calling to be a way of expressing their identity. When they encountered challenges, they saw them as a rather affront to their identity. They were uniquely gifted to do animal work. Here's a challenge. It's stopping me feeling very gifted. I don't seem able to cope. They responded with some anger and some distress at these challenges and took actions that tried to remove them from the challenges they encountered. So they found other parts of the shelter to work in that made them feel gifted again to be doing this work. They tried this in many different ways. Nothing really worked for them. And in the end, all their efforts led them to burnout and ultimately to leave the shelter. The second path we called the contribution-oriented path. These people understood their calling to be a way that they could make a contribution in the world. They really wanted to make a difference. This is where they were going to do it. They encountered challenges and they saw them not as an affront to their identity, but as something that was stopping them making the contribution they wished to make. They tried to make a bigger contribution. They tried to take on leadership roles in the shelter. This also didn't really work for them. And although they began feeling just a little negative, over time they became really quite negative and quite frustrated. Ultimately, again, over time, they ended up also burning out. They just felt defeated by this stagnant shelter context, which just wouldn't change in the way they felt they could help it change. The final group of people created a path that we've called the practice-oriented path. And these individuals came in with great passion, but with more modest aspirations. They felt this was the work they were called to do, but they didn't really know quite how to do it. So they saw themselves as here to learn how to do animal shelter work. And when they encountered challenges, they were surprised. It wasn't what they'd thought, but they weren't deeply distressed by it. And when they needed help, they asked other people for help. And as they gained more mastery, they gave help to others. And they're the ones who were still there at the time that we were conducting this study. People who are following their calling care enormously about the work they're doing. They really want to do it very well, and they go above and beyond to get it done. So in a way, they're exactly the kind of worker that every employer would like to have. But what our study is showing is that people coming in with this kind of passion can end up derailing themselves through trying to do the work they feel so strongly called to do. One of the real takeaways for leaders and managers in organisations who want to hire people with a calling is to recognise that they're not all the same. There are differences in those individuals, and that has implications for how they should be managed and nurtured to bring the best they can to the organisation.